Hello, Brian Pierce with the Pierce Brothers. Today we're going to talk about the Smith & Wesson mountain gun. This is one of my personal favorites. This one's a model 629. We'll cover the dashes in a moment. It's chambered in 44 Magnum. It's one of the earlier ones, and we'll talk about this gun more in a moment, but we're going to go back and talk about kind of what led up to the development of the Smith mountain gun. So I kind of want to start off with the model 1950 Target Smith & Wesson 44 Special. This was a real classic gun. This is a pre-model 44 Special, and if you'll notice, the barrel is tapered beautifully, which was traditional at that time. The Smith & Wesson triple lock, the registered magnums and so forth, all the same thing, very gracefully tapered barrels. And this was one of Elmer Keith's favorite guns, actually, the 4-inch 1950 Target, until the 44 Magnum came about. I might remind people that in this configuration, Keith had a 250 grain bullet going 1,200 feet per second. He was 100% happy with the performance of that gun. Had Smith & Wesson or rather Remington or Winchester, somebody come out with that heavy 44 Special load, we probably never would have got the 44 Magnum, but that's another story. So hold the thought on that gun for a minute, because in 1955, actually, the Smith & Wesson 44 Magnum came out, and this became Elmer Keith's new baby. And if you'll look, you'll see that Smith & Wesson did several things. One, they took the cylinder, they lengthened it. They took the barrel, the tapered barrel, they added a heavier barrel, as you can see. And of course, they widened the rib on the barrel, made a little more muzzle weight because they knew it was going to be a kicker. And there was some extra heat treating in the cylinder and so forth that increased the strength a little bit. But this became the famous model. This was simply known as 44 Magnum at that time. But by 1957, it became the Model 29, as everybody calls it today. So they added a little bit of weight to that. Now, the next thing that was significant was that they, it's kind of hard to explain this in such short order, but they took in 1988, they began with, now you gotta listen close to how I say this, they first offered the Mountain Revolver, the Smith & Wesson 629-2 Mountain Revolver, not Mountain Gun, Mountain Revolver. This gun had a very interesting, this is original Packmeyer grips, the whole shebang as they came from the factory. Notice the roll markings on the barrels rather than the later method of an etching being put on there. A standard trigger and hammer, had a very radiused cylinder. Now this gun actually would have been this was actually the result of a Smith & Wesson gentleman that worked in the tool shop. His name was Tom Campbell, and he was, if you'll notice, the finish on this gun versus the later mountain guns is a vapor blasting. It's very fine. It's a soft, subtle finish. But the concept was that they were going to lighten the gun up a little bit. Now, again, the guy that's going to shoot a gun a lot, he wants probably more muzzle weight, but the guy that's going to carry this gun a lot, he wants a lighter weight gun. I know, because I carry a big bore 6 gun daily, and weight becomes a real issue. You get where it's like, do I want to lug that thing today? So you make sure you're carrying guns that are down enough on weight and in the proper designed holster and so forth that you feel lost without it. You feel naked without it. That was the concept of the mountain gun. Now, at this time, Smith & Wesson had been through kind of some difficulties in maintaining tolerances. Some of their guns were shooting loose prematurely. The end shake in the cylinder wasn't, it was getting excessive. And actually what had happened is that there was a couple of silhouette shooters that bought some brand new Smith & Wesson 44 Magnums, and the guns were, as they'd fire, in 44 Magnum, of course, as the guns would fire, the cylinder would back up one chamber. So boom, the cylinder would unlatch during recoil, and it would back up. So when they'd cock the gun again, it would align it with the cylinder or the chamber that they had just fired. And this became kind of a big deal. Smith & Wesson really began focusing what they could do. This early Mountain revolver had some of the new developmental changes in what became the Endurance package. So I don't want to dwell on that too much. These are kind of collectible. I've left this one alone with original grips. I call them grips because they are rubber grips. And they ultimately brought them to develop what commonly became known as the Endurance package. An Endurance package, and I'll show you a little more detail of that in just a moment, but it included a special heat treating of the frame and the crane. It included a radius stud package. If you've ever sheared off the studs in a frame, you'll realize there's no better way to put a revolver out of commission than to shear those off. By doing that, Smith & Wesson increased the endurance of these guns substantially. They also, if you look close, they went from this notch, this bolt notch right here. They lengthened it. You can see the length differences there. And what was happening was that under high-speed photography, they realized that the cylinder end shake was bumping the bolt, or the stop bolt, if you will, down in the frame, and it would leave the cylinder unlocked for just a millisecond, but it was enough that the cylinder would move under recoil. So again, they lengthened the length of these right here, the cylinder bolt notches or stop notches, to a longer version. So that was one of the other items on the Endurance packages that came about. Now, again, they went to a standard smooth trigger hammer. You may notice this is a very early gun. And by the way, those are going to ask, these are Roper stocks that are offered by Harrod Stocks. So they're still available, very comfortable. But they did all this. One thing they did do was they made the frame a round butt frame. I'm not a big fan of round butt frame, but it accomplished a couple things. It shaved a little bit of weight off, but it gave a lot more people options for the size and shape of the grip that they can fit to the gun. This brings it back to a square butt configuration. So now during the process of all this, that became the 629-2E, standing for Endurance, which is a transitional model. Finally, the 629-3 in 1989 was the full-blown Endurance package gun. Now, that's very important to know, because I consider those guns from that era, from 1989, 1990 through 1997, the pinnacle in quality, accuracy, durability of all Smith & Wesson 44s. Absolutely, without question, in my opinion. Smith & Wesson really focused on the end shake. There's just virtually none on that. Just enough that reliability runs with that cylinder. In other words, it turns freely. They had wonderfully cut barrels. They just really, they also tightened up the throats a little bit. Smith & Wesson their throats typically ran 431, 432. They became then 429. Those guns became extremely tight shooters. Once in a while, I've had one that was a little on the tight side, and I've opened them up to 430, and man, they're seriously accurate. This was in the era the Smith & Wesson began offering the 629DX, which was the I'm losing my voice. 629DX, which was a special accuracy-proven revolver from Smith & Wesson. They had heavy underlug barrels, longer barrels, typically 6.5 and 8 3/8 inch. But those guns commonly, if you scope them up, would shoot an inch with premium ammo at 100 yards. Incredibly accurate guns. With that said, if you can hold it with these guns, they're just as accurate. They're drilled under the sight for scope mounts, and I actually scoped this gun up clear back in the early 90s when I first got it, and shot this gun, and it was giving me ragged whole groups at 50 yards that you wouldn't believe. So they're super accurate. And this one actually loves the Keith bullet, by the way, which is pretty much everything. What I've only shot in this gun has been cast bullets. This gun's accounted for deer with me, coyotes, a variety of stuff. And as the old saying goes, a pair and a spare is always a good thing. So I've bought several of them, and there's not been a stinker in them. These are all of course, Hillary hole, as they like to call them. And these all, by the way, I didn't mention, these are now mountain revolvers, not mountain guns like this was. So there is a difference. So not long after the 44 mag, they'd make a series of small runs of them because they weren't mainstream guns. In fact, a lot of times Smith & Wesson didn't advertise them. They just make them available to dealers and they disappear. So not long after that, they introduced the 45 Colt version, and that's also a wonderful gun. This one I've shot a lot, and I've even taken several headed deer with this gun. Beautiful shooting gun. Has all the same features as the endurance package model 29s and that, but it does not have, or excuse me, 629s, but it does not have the bolt block. We'll show you what the bolt block is in just a minute. Very good design. People are going to ask, you know, what pressure levels do these take? I'm not going to say. I actually know where they start to rattle loose prematurely. I typically shoot these with no loads that don't exceed 23 to 25,000 PSI tops. They'll take more, but if I need more, I go to the 44 Magnum in this particular gun. So another interesting mountain gun is, of course, the Model 625 chambered in 45 ACP. And, of course, you can shoot 45 auto rim and shoot revolver bullets, or you can stick with the 45 auto with the speed loaders in a full moon clip. And that makes a very fast way to load and reload. So that's an interesting variation of the mountain gun. I hope they bring it back. Another one that's particularly interesting is the L frame, and this one is, of course, a 7-shot 357. It actually has the tapered barrel. And it actually feels very much like a K-frame because, one, they lighten it up with the extra hole in the cylinder, and very nice handling guns. So here's another rare variation. It's a 41 Magnum. You just don't see these pop up very often. This particular gun is a shooter, but one of the frustrations with Smith was, I mentioned that the pinnacle years were from about 89 through about 90, 97. The reason I chose those years is that in 97 they began using MIM parts. And it actually gave them a lot of trouble at first. I think they've got a better handle on that now. I actually know they do. But they also, in about 2000 or 2001, they began using EDM cut rifling. So electric discharge, they go in and cut the rifling. It wasn't the old sharp-shouldered, beautifully cut barrels that we'd seen from Smith & Wesson. The problem with those guns, two problems. One, we saw velocities drop with that barrel. The second thing was the accuracy fell off. A lot of them shot fairly good with jacketed. A lot of them won't shoot cast, but pretty so-so. So I've got one that, actually, my son Porter ended up with it, a Model 25. They did a few blued guns in 45 Colt. That gun actually shoots pretty good with cast bullets, and it's got an EDM rifle. So they're rifling. So there is exceptions, but just generally speaking, that's I wasn't wild about that change. So this one actually I sent back to the factory and complained about the accuracy. They returned it. I took it to Texas a couple of days later, shot several white-tailed deer, javelinas, hogs, you name it. The gun's a great hunting and field gun. But anyway, so there you have it. There's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm going to take, demonstrate something here very briefly. These stocks on this 629 mountain gun, this is a -4, they're from Eagle Grips, and if you look, they're round butted, or the gun is round butted, but they convert it to a square butt configuration. These are patterned a little bit after the Smith & Wesson Target Coke bottle grips of the 1950s that are so popular and actually very valuable today. So I'm going to take this one step further here, though, and just go ahead and disassemble this gun briefly. I want to show you the bolt block real quick. And again, YouTube, this is not for, we're not modifying a gun. We're showing the proper way to access a gun, to clean it or lubricate it, but also just to display the mechanics. So again, there's no No modifications taking place here. So I did not bring my plastic mallet, so I'm going to have to cheat here. Take this side plate off by doing that. Again, a plastic mallet on metal won't hurt anything. So here we've got the lock work, the proven lock work. This is at a time that they were still machining everything. I was going to point out one thing. These, if you notice, the hammer and trigger on this one, these are both -4 guns. This one is, everybody says they're stainless. No, they're not stainless. They're actually a flash chrome plating. Smith & Wesson had to abandon that because of EPA regulation. So just so you know, a bit of trivia there. So nothing wrong with the case colored one, but they will rust. So keep things oiled and lubed and whatever else, and you're good. And by the way, one time I was up in Alaska hunting, and the guides had a Native American guide, and he was his Smith & Wesson would not work, and he was pretty amazed that I said, well, let's fix that thing. He's carrying it for bear protection. It was the only gun he had, and we were of course hunting bear, and we were seeing a lot of bears, and so hang on, I almost got it. Anyway, I wound up, the cylinder, somebody had taken that gun apart and put it back together improperly, and that one was tight. I've not done an action job on this particular gun, but anyway, I set up there in the middle of the mountain range, like days backpacking away from anywhere, and disassembled his gun. So yeah, there we go. Get that hand out of there so I don't have to rearrest that. So this little part right here is called the bolt block, and that was part of the endurance package. We'll point to that a little bit better. And so what it does is when the gun fires, it keeps this latch from being able to open. This is called the bolt right here. So it actually slides and locks that in place, and it will not let the gun pop open under heavy recoil or anything. So Smith & Wesson significantly improved the endurance of their guns, the Model 29s, when they did that. Literally, I've taken the older version of Model 29s and shot them loose and rebuild them, you know, corrected end shake again and again and again. And these guns are far more durable than the original Model 29s that we know and love, because they're beautiful finish and they're fine actions and so forth, wonderful trigger pulls and all the stuff we love Smith & Wessons for. But that was part of the endurance package, along with the radius stud package, and of course the lengthened notches on the cylinder, special heat treating the crane and the frame area. And so Smith & Wesson really did it right. They started watching their quality control very carefully, keeping the guns locking tight, the end shake tight, and those were pinnacle guns. Now I got to shift gears. This is August of 2025. In January of 2025, we went to SHOT Show. A couple of my sons and I, we examined Lipsey's new mountain gun that they had on display. They'd only received it a couple of days prior to the show, and a couple things I noticed: that the DM rifling was gone, which we were very happy about. That what everybody calls the Hillary hole, which is a lock right here above the cylinder latch, and nobody likes. Everybody cusses them. They've actually a couple times been known to lock up guns when they shouldn't have. So that's now gone, so we're really happy about that. No, I have not bought one to review. You can see why. I've been shooting mountain guns a long time, very fond of them, very good idea. But one of these days I will put my hands on a new mountain gun and I will do a review here. Before we close on this video, I'm just going to mention a couple of other lightweights. This is, of course, the Smith & Wesson 329 PD, which is of course a 44 Magnum titanium, only weighs 26.5 ounces, super light. They're made again to be carried a lot, shot a little bit. I've carried this in Alaska on long pack trips and in hunting where you live out of your pack for weeks on end. Very good gun, but they do recoil. You don't end up shooting them for fun. This is, of course, the Model 69. It's a 5-shot L-frame, 44 Magnum, and it's it actually feels more like a K-frame. The weight, the balance, it's actually about 2 ounces lighter than the Mountain Gun 44 Magnum. Now, incidentally, Smith & Wesson only shaved off about 3 or 4 ounces with that trimmer barrel, lighter barrel in the Mountain Gun versus the Model 29, but that's still 3 or 4 ounces. And this one shaves off a couple more ounces. Here's one that's not a Mountain Gun, but it's a Mountain Light, as Smith & Wesson calls it, in 44 Special. It only weighs, if I remember right, 18 ounces. And of course, it's another one of the scandium, titanium blended alloyed guns. Very interesting gun. Can't load it too heavy, but there you go. So there you go with the Mountain Gun. Again, it's one of my favorites. The great hunting gun, great field gun, great daily working man's gun. So yeah, I really like them. Very fond of them. Great gun, very super accurate, very practical. It's going to shoot a lot. You may want something heavier than 44 Magnum, but the other calibers do offer other options. At this point right now, I'm not sure what other calibers Lipsy is going to offer. Jason Kloster and I've talked about that some. There's going to be some really interesting offerings, but we'll let them announce that and we'll keep you posted. So Joe just quickly pointed out that I never finished my story about taking that Smith & Wesson revolver apart in the mountains. So a guide, Jim Waggett, and a Native American packer was with us. The Packer Smith Model 29, somebody taking it apart, didn't know how to put it back together. It wasn't working and had a hammer spring and all that, but I said, I can fix that for you. So we laid out of one of the tents and I had that thing disassembled in a few seconds, and I repaired that thing and got him on the road, and he was elated. And I said, well, yeah, we can't have a single shot with a bear gun. So he was yeah, that was kind of a funny story. And they still, that's been 20 years ago, and to this day, I still once in a while get a call reminding me of that, and it's like, well, it's no big deal, I mean, anybody could have done it that knows Smith & Wessons. Anyway, it's kind of funny, but Joe just reminded me I forgot to finish the story. I got busy talking about what I was doing. So anyway, thanks again. We'll see you next time.